Every mass atrocity requires silence first. You probably heard, but they arrested Don Lemon. Not for violence, not for inciting a riot, but while documenting a protest. And every time the government arrests the people holding the cameras, history tells us exactly what comes next. Welcome to my History Echo series, because being educated in history ruins the propaganda. I could spend this video talking to you guys about the Reichstag fire and how the Nazi regime arrested journalists, shut down opposition newspapers, and outlawed independent reporting because the press was silenced before mass arrests, camps, and genocide, not after. Or we could talk about the Soviet Union in the 1920s and 30s, when journalism was a crime. Or in Argentina during the Dirty War, when journalists who were documenting the disappearances were detained, tortured, or just disappeared. Or following the 2016 coup attempt in Turkey, where hundreds of journalists were arrested. The list goes on and on and on. This could be a 10-minute video, but that could never happen here, right? Wrong, it has. Save this for later in case you don't have time to watch it now, because this is a deep dive, and it's important. Especially when we're speaking about the arrest of Don Lemon, who was arrested not during the actual protest, but now days after, when he was simply there documenting. Because this reignites a First Amendment question. What happens when the government criminalizes the act of witnessing? So let's talk about American history. The Sedition Act of 1798 created a crime to publish anything that was false, scandalous, or malicious against the U.S. government. At least 25 people were arrested, many of them newspaper editors, journalists that were critical of President John Adams. The outcome was that opposition newspapers shut down, editors were imprisoned, and public criticism sharply declined. This is considered the first major suppression of press freedom in the United States, and now it's widely regarded as unconstitutional. Yet in 1919, we had the Palmer Raids. Under Attorney General Palmer, federal agents conducted mass raids targeting anarchists, labor organizers, and immigrants. And the journalists that covered these labor movements and immigration enforcements were detained, surveilled, and had their materials stolen. This resulted in over 10,000 arrests, hundreds of deportations, widespread violations to due process. Sounding familiar? These raids are now taught and cited as constitutional failures driven by fear. And then from 1956 to 1971, we had the COINTELPRO, silencing through surveillance. This is where the FBI targeted civil leaders and the journalists covering them. Reporters were surveilled, intimidated, and sometimes detained to discourage coverage. So media withdrew from controversial beats. Civil rights and anti-war protests reporting was suppressed. Here's a direct quote from the U.S. Senate Church Committee in 1975. The FBI used covert action to disrupt and neutralize political movements and those who reported on them. This is far from an exhaustive list, because here's a map from just 2020 of journalists' arrests. But the historical pattern is the point, and I think you might have gotten there with me. Across U.S. history, the sequence is consistent. Number 1, the state expands security powers. Protesters are arrested. Observers are detained. Journalists are criminalized or intimidated. Public knowledge collapses, and the government can get away with the atrocities happening. This is a documented governance drift. So why does this moment matter? When a journalist is arrested while documenting, the legal question is not guilt. It is who gets to decide what journalism is. Historically, the power never stays neutral on this. History doesn't start with censorship laws. It starts by making witnesses be afraid to show up. And they are doing that on multiple fronts. History doesn't repeat itself loudly, it repeats itself procedurally. And one of the final steps is arresting the people who make sure we remember and are informed. If you think this is dramatic, open a history book or follow me and stick around this page. You can also check out this playlist, because every society that has jailed journalists had a reason, and none of them aged well. Because remember, before camps, before purges, before disappearances, they arrested journalists. Send this to someone you don't think is mad enough. Send this to someone who isn't seeing the importance of today's news or doesn't see the importance of journalism. And stick around for more.